And I think when I first described it, I kind of might have lied just a little bit. The security architecture, now you're going to find when we get to it. I mean, it hasn't changed much. It's just, what you need to do, what we need to account for to deal with what's changed in our environment since COVID. So just a very little about me. And I think you already presented everything I have up here. But yeah, I currently work at cloud storage services company. I've more than 20 years in cybersecurity experience, working in multiple verticals, did all kinds of things across cybersecurity. And eventually what happened is they either make you a security architect, a manager, or both. And after running away from the management track, back to being security architect, I currently do work remote. One of the things that happened when I was, it happened during COVID is I realized, hey, I actually don't need to be going into an office. Now, to be fair, when I get to that point, there are some reasons why at that particular job you kind of did need to go, if not to an office, to sites, but more about that in the future. And currently living in Maryland with my family, 2 children, one in college and one out of college, and finding a job and still living in our house. So we already talked about this before, but basically this could have been described in 3 parts: the before COVID, the during COVID, and the what now. But I kind of got to a point where I wasn't going to change the slides anymore because I was just doing a bit too much of that. So this is what we got. Again, this is the point. I feel that we need to remember what happened during that time, and remember that for most of us, it was, for the most part, a success story. You had to make some rapid changes very quickly, generally on infrastructure that wasn't meant to support what you were doing, and sort of fix it all later. And I think for the most part, we managed to do that, but we do want to look back at what happened, think about how we could do better the next time so that when these sort of events happen again, and they will happen again, it won't necessarily be a pandemic, it'll be something else, or it might be a pandemic again. It seems like we'll be getting those annually now. We can be more resilient in how we deal with it. So, a quick look at the past, to the 1960s or 70s. I can't remember when this movie came out, Monty Python. Does anybody remember? Yeah. It was funny, but no coconuts this time. So, traditional security architecture. I'm being a reductive here, but this goes back to something that happened to me at a job many years ago, where someone in management told me, we are secure, we have firewalls, we're okay. The good stuff is inside, the bad stuff is outside. You don't need to worry about these other things you're telling me about. So from the beginning, it was flawed. We kept having to put more and more holes, in that firewall. Like, same for a castle. If you just had a castle with no gate, everybody kind of starved to death in the end. Interesting thing about this castle too. This is Castle Harlech, which is in Wales. Very nice. You should go see it sometime. Was built by the English to establish their control over the Welsh, and but they didn't properly man it, so the Welsh took it, and Owen Glendower managed to use it as his headquarters, and it took the English a number of years to get it back. So there probably is another talk there, but don't have time for that. So yeah, back to the problem. Stop chewy internal network. The inside was trusted, so once an attacker got on the inside, he could just sit there and listen, and gather information. But also, all the entities, all the hosts were trusted as well. So once he, popped one system, that system was trusted by other systems. Once he got one account, that account was trusted by other accounts. If he got the local admin on that system, I know where I worked before, some years ago, the help desk just had the same password for all the local admins, so he had local admin access to every host, so he can hop around. At least eventually they set up so if somebody tried to log in remotely or over the network with a local admin account, the system would go, hey, wait, you shouldn't be doing that. But this, all these problems still existed. And then came the cloud. And again, not to diss firewalls, not to diss perimeter security. When I get later in the presentation, we'll talk about that. They still have a place. It's just that you have to be more nuanced in what you do. And jump really quickly to the bottom. This, cloud is just a thing. It's not necessarily more secure or less secure. In a lot of cases, no offense, but the cloud systems might be better and secured and more secure than your data centers. But it's just a fact of life. But the key thing here is that if you have your data, if you have your users using, say, Office 365, they've got OneDrive. If you don't have MFA enabled, not saying this happened, then an attacker can, once they compromise that user's password, they get access to the OneDrive, and they can just start pumping out everything from their OneDrive, and your firewall and all your perimeter security, your IDS, that's not going to help you. You're not aware of it. Just know that did happen at a company, and it was kind of funny because they told us that they couldn't implement MFA, that it was just too onerous. Everyone came out with pitchforks and torches, and MFA was implemented in 2 weeks after that. It's like, if you want to stop it, this is what you're going to do. So, then came the Internet of Things. This is, to my mind, and this is a bit more of a security issue than the cloud implementation was, because a lot of the devices kind of went out with a rush to market and brought back a lot of the old security problems that we had already dealt with. With regards to that, like devices with default passwords that couldn't be changed, or maybe no authentication at all, bringing back protocols such as Telnet, which we got rid of, but now again. But these are your data center environmental sensors, your elevator sensors, things like that. When I worked at Amtrak, the new train, if they ever get it out, was promised. Well, I don't work there now, so I can say this. It was promised first in 2021, and now maybe it'll come out in 2024. We'll see. But it had sensors all through. It was pretty amazing. It was for the doors, for the seats, ultimately where you're going to sit. The funniest one was like the sensor for the bathroom, but was also kind of the most dangerous, because that was the one what they always said was like, we don't need to worry about it because we have, if anybody tries to tamper with something, we'll see it. It's like, well, what about the one in the bathroom? You're not going to see that. But yeah, don't work there now. So I'm sure they dealt with that. So yeah, Moat and Castle, that perimeter architecture was already on its way out. With cloud, IoT, third-party integrations, that was already a thing. Business-to-business connectivity. I mean, your perimeter was already pretty porous. It wasn't real. It's more like a spongy mass than a perimeter. And you already had remote workers. You just didn't have that many. And already had people saying like, gosh, we could probably all do this from home, or we don't have to come into the office to do this work. But, the management was like, yeah, we kind of want you to be there. So sorry, another quick story. My wife had a boss who insisted she come into the office every day. So she'd go into the office, do her work in her office, didn't see anybody. If she needed to communicate with her boss, who was 2 doors down, she had to email her. Didn't want to be seen. Couldn't go with her, but she had to come into the office. So it's like, what was the point of that? So then there was one more problem. Yeah. So I won't go into details about that date. That's the date I got off the internet, and I got it from the CDC, so they know better than me. My wife's she's a healthcare writer, and she works with folks who have determined that that date might not be right, particularly for the U.S. That it might have been earlier than that. That again, different talk, different speaker, probably different conference. What I do know is that when this happened, I was working at Amtrak, and before it happened, they were thinking the next year they were going to go to profitability. Life was going to be good. They were sending trains everywhere, and then this happened. Nobody's riding trains. Nobody's traveling. Profits dropped by 90%. They're furloughing workers, and if you wanted to stay there, you had to take a 30% pay cut. So, pretty awesome times. So yeah, during COVID, employees who didn't absolutely have to work in the office or on site, and again, like a place like Amtrak did, there was a number of employees who had to go to do whatever it was they were going to do. I mean, you had to go be at that counter, for those few people who still had to travel. Tracks still needed to be maintained. Trains still needed to go up and down the rail, so people needed to go in the office and handle that. But for most people, if you could go work from home, you did. For instance, my current company, Backways, that didn't really affect them so much. Meetings, conferences, in-person trainings, all online only or simply canceled. Now this is the key one: remote access infrastructure that was designed for a fraction of the people that it was supposed to support suddenly had to support a whole lot more. So you had some remote users who were administrators who, they had a certain level of access, and then you had everybody else. But now suddenly we had administrators, users, but then special users. We had some users who had access to PCI systems, and you couldn't just throw them on the VPN, because then suddenly everything was in scope for PCI, and we didn't want that. So you had to determine who really needed access to PCI information, and some folks were upset to find that actually you're not that important, you don't get this, sorry. And then to make this work, we had to set up what was called an boxes, but essentially little SD-WAN boxes, little SOHO devices at their homes, so that they could connect and still do what they need to do and still be on that segregated environment, because that's all we had at the time. Because the other thing was you really couldn't buy much in the way of hardware at this time, no matter how much money you had. This is where we get to the articles at the time, and there's a bunch of them. I cut this down basically to just a few, and also show that it was a worldwide issue. Let's go forward. There we go. Cool. And then after it ended, corporations, there we are again, tended to want to try to bring employees back. And I know at Amtrak, when they put out to the folks who could go home, because again, there's a significant a significant percentage of the employees who had to go no matter what. But of those who could work from home and had the opportunity to work from home, when they were told, you are going to come back, how do you feel about that? In a survey, the response for about 50% of them was, we're going to go find a new job. And so the bosses said, management said, okay, we'll come up with a different solution. And that's kind of where a lot of companies have fallen down to. Most are at a hybrid setup now, where some folks can work from home, some folks who really want to be in the office all the time do, those few, and everybody else is hybrid. They come into the office for some time, and they work from home other times. And this is something I'm going to have to add at some point to the presentation, but this is an issue because I have, like I said before, I have a daughter now who just started work, and so she's sort of entry level. And when you're an entry level employee, not having somebody to work with, not having a mentor to be there for you can be a real problem, particularly if you work like a lot of us in a space where that mentorship was very important. And unfortunately, I'm not going to have so much of an answer for that yet. But I have a child in that state, so I'm getting interested in that too. Minor detour, your carbon footprint. Sorry, I found this on line. Not to my distraction. And I still need to figure out those two other percentages because it's interesting. Side concern about employer surveillance. This is something else I came across that wouldn't have been an issue at some of my past employers, but is an issue like where I am now, where employees do not, where I worked before, like if you had a government or a corporate or government issued device and you took it home with you, you had absolutely no expectation of privacy. And that was understood. As an employee, that was understood. For some other corporations, the employee working at home still has that expectation of privacy, and that was, when you look into the culture of the workplace there, that is expected, across the board. Like management's like, well, of course they're going to expect that, and that can create issues with the kind of tools you. I know for us, even like endpoint detection and response, there were some folks nervous about that. It's like, because you can see a whole lot, you can see a whole lot more than what you're saying, and the answer is true. Yes, we can, but we're not doing that. And also at the bottom, you probably need to talk to your legal department. Privacy, or becomes an issue if there's any particular legal concerns in your region or your area. So what do we do now? If anybody watch this TV show, is this IT Crowd? Awesome, yeah. It's fun. Yeah. So what I'm gonna present now is just my observations and information that I pulled and think was interesting. And it's all about mitigation and not so much I'm not gonna be able to solve any problems. But and if I mention or any particular products, that's by happenstance. I'm not recommending any particular tool. And as I'm going to get into it too, like if you're in your space, a particular tool works for you, awesome, go for it. So again, mitigations, not solutions. And I feel like I was overly harsh with this. You're going to have to determine in your own space, what works for you. If a virtual desktop infrastructure, works in your space, awesome. Implement it. If SASE works for you, if you got the funding for it, awesome. Implement it. What was important to keep in mind is none of us have infinite funding, and you're going to need to look at your own space, your own infrastructure, and determine what is important to you and what tools need to make security work in your environment. So, like I said before, it's not really a new architecture, it's an old one, but time-based security. So you have prevention, detection, response, or reaction. And the idea is the number for P, or the time it takes for an attacker to overcome your preventative controls, greater then the number D plus the number R. So the idea is your firewall doesn't have to keep everything at all times. It has to keep it out long enough so you can. And how do you determine P? So that's going to change from, depending on your organization. It's hard to quantify. But practically speaking, what you want to do is you want to test. If you can set up a purple team exercise, awesome. That's where you have your red team, your blue team work together and work out some scenarios. You have a lot of folks working at home now. Work that into your purple team scenarios. Like, if somebody at home makes go someplace they shouldn't, if somebody at home is compromised, if somebody at home is actually malicious, how are you going to respond to that? When you have penetration tests, have it set up so that include that as a scenario for a penetration test. For an internal penetration test. Now I mentioned the CrowdStrike recommendations here. The 1-10-60 rule. That's 1 minute to detect, investigate within 10, and isolate, remediate within 60. I'm going to get back to that in a minute because that's kind of a fun number. I've been at some other presentations where they talk about know thyself, and so this is temet nosce, which is the Latin. Nothesiaton is the Greek. But yeah, know your systems, know your environment. Endpoint detection and response agents can be very helpful with this. If you don't have commercial products, using OS query to determine, query your environment and know what's out there is one tool you can use. Mmap's another one, but there's a host of open source tools you can use to get to know your environment and inventory your network. If you have any sort of compliance requirements, such as PCI, I mentioned HIPAA. HIPAA's not really going to help you there, sorry. But use those to build off of, because those folks are those systems that aren't good for PCI, for instance. Those guys are going to know down to the letter everything about those systems. So you can use that as a basis and work out for that. As a side note, it says 7 sages. There's 9 up there. Apparently they couldn't agree on who the 7 sages were, so there you have it. So as I mentioned before, as we knew, firewalls are still of value, but you have to consider as a segmented networks and have your networks tiered. So now you have your remote users essentially on the outside, or you can keep on the outside, or you can bring them virtually inside. But you want to take the critical systems that you know about, that you've identified, and bring them into your network, and really focus on them. So you have your critical systems, you're protecting them. For your remote users, think about how you can provide them access in the most secure way possible. So, can you stand up VDI? Can you provide them a dedicated host or solutions? Can you publish apps? I might be dating myself with that, but that's an option too. And implement a SASE. I know, where I am now, it's all VPN, which is fine, but there's we'll get into that in a minute. But there's stuff you need to do with that if you're gonna stay with the VPN solution. So prevention, remote users. Multi-factor authentication, I'm going to do this probably a few more times just because hopefully everybody's implemented that. Has anybody, who's implemented multi-factor authentication at their own? Yeah. It's absolutely critical, and this is going to be very important to your security. And then again, this is not this talk, but your choice of MFA matters. If you implemented MFA, look at implementing YubiKey or FIDO2, at least for your critical users, for your admins. Please get away from SMS. That works if maybe somebody forgot their password, but or for some e-commerce sites because the customers won't stand for more, but it should not be used for general authentication at this point. That said, if you haven't implemented MFA yet, implement SMS. That's not great, but it's better than nothing. You're inside maybe in the cloud, and that's okay. That's that might be where all your critical environment systems are now, and that's fine. But keep in mind that your users are accessing them, even more than ever, now more than ever, from outside your network. I mentioned a few virtual desktop infrastructures here: Azure Virtual Desktop and AWS Workspaces. We were at Amtrak again during COVID. Let me back it up. The first time it needed to be implemented was at a place where a business partner, who was using their own systems to access our network over a site-to-site VPN tunnel. And since it's their desktops, they were in charge of the security. They provided us a checklist. Checklist was fine. So anyway, they're connecting to our systems over a VPN with their own hosts. Well, yeah, and so that meant compromised. Their workstations are owned by someone else, and they have a tunnel that's open VPN directly into our network. So after that, the question was, well, how are we going to deal with that? We're going to set up going forward, you're going to have a virtual desktop environment. You can't use your company hardware to connect to our network. So we initially set up Amazon Workspaces, AWS Workspaces, and that worked fine. And this could have changed since then, but initially, at least, AWS Workspaces, the workstation was actually Microsoft Server under the hood, which meant that when our desktop team tried to implement workstation policies and the policies that were supposed to apply to workstations, it didn't apply so well. So when we moved over to which worked better in the native Microsoft environment. I don't think that's necessarily a ding against AWS so much as the big players not wanting to play well with each other. And so we went first with the that scenario, and then during COVID they're like, well, why are we shipping laptops to contractors at all? The contractors ship laptops to. Let's just have them get them a virtual desktop. So it wound up being, I guess, a cost-saving solution and also a security solution too, because when you have a VDI, it's in a space that you control. You're getting some of that insideness back. So if you can do that, go do that. But if like where I'm now, like if you do VPN, just get into this more later on, but step up your VPN. It can do more than authenticate and encrypt traffic. And manage the local firewall on the hosts, because unfortunately that becomes a perimeter now, depending on where your end user is. Cloud security. This is essentially another perimeter. This might be, for some of your users, this might be how they interact with you entirely. I mentioned cloud security broker there. Just from my experience, sometimes, again, the big players don't play well with each other or with the CASB. I just say that because I've seen like a very good CASB solution, go down because they couldn't get it to work with the first generation CSP they were working with. I want to also mention data loss prevention, because I had kind of touched on that earlier with that the issue with the OneDrive. If you had that in place, you would have at least known, like with data loss detection, you at least known, hey, right away, something's going out to the internet that shouldn't be. You want to implement DLP, and you want to make sure you implement it across all your cloud services. I know there's always an issue where now you have it maybe implemented for Google, for OneDrive, but maybe you didn't have it for Slack. Just be sure you got full coverage there, because that's where your employees work. All right, so detection. I mentioned the 11060 before. Now this is according to Varonis. I found some other numbers out there as well, but this is, it doesn't matter too much because, what? Oh, okay. Hello. Oh, hello. Hello. But I want to turn my head, okay? All right, if something's not there, just tell me. Okay, we'll just try that. Keep looking this way. Okay, so according to Varonis, like 150 days to 250 to 87, apparently in the entertainment industry is the worst. No, sorry if anybody's in the entertainment industry. You got awesome. And the energy industry is the best. I can see why. Those guys are insane. So yeah, remote systems make this work worse because if your time to detect on a remote system is very, very small versus the time to time to detect and react. It happens like when it's popped. It puts your perimeter right out there at the end user. And so the detection and your detection controls that are available to you are much smaller than back when they were back in the office. You don't have firewall, then end user. You have, and then other network devices. You have really just endpoint. You don't have their network, their personal network to work with. So I'll try to get this. I think I got a bit more quicker now. Let's see. So endpoint detection, now more than ever, is your first line of defense. Test this beforehand. You're going to see this again in response, but I'm going to say this now. You have the plan to quarantine a device with EDR. Make sure you test this out beforehand. Again, another place I was working at, we didn't do that, or it wasn't done. They said it would work, but basically we didn't find out that it wasn't working the way it was expected to until a user left the company, gone rogue, took the laptop, left the country, and they're like, okay, lockdown device. Oh, hey, not working. So test that out. That's crucial. Have these, particularly for cloud, have the log security events written to your own SIM. Because that way you control the how long you have those log events. Something else we found is if you keep them in the cloud, they might store them for 45 days. They might need to store them for 90. You need them for at least a year. As you saw, you might not find out about it for 287 days. Actually, you might not find out about it for longer still. So you need at least a year, maybe more, in logs to maintain. So, yeah, and this is another key one. Provide employees cybersecurity training. Your employees can be a detection resource. Use them. Don't think of them as the problem. They can start becoming part of the solution. They know what goes on in their environment. Make training fun for them. There's gamification that's available through a lot of training solutions. But you can build your own games. You can do your own processes. One thing we did was we set up like a sort of like a game show for our company where people could compete and win prizes. Stand up a security partner program. So it's something we did at Amtrak, where people in different organizations were volunteered or voluntold in some cases, at least initially, but eventually they volunteered to become security partners, who are people who would help represent security to their departments, their areas, as well as bring back from their areas information to us so we better understood how they worked and how they did what they did. Just because it provided another line of communications. One of my coworkers at the time had formerly worked at Cisco. They did something similar, and it worked out very well for them as well. And I know where I am now, we have what we call the Security Champions program, or it's really more of a Slack channel. But the same idea, like, you have a lot of people who work elsewhere in your company, not in cybersecurity, but have a security interest and probably want to help you. So make it easy for them to help you. And maybe that makes it easier for you to help them. So again, nothing new here. Automate wherever possible. Known bad should be bad. Known bad should be blocked. It should be bad too. And if you can implement a SOAR, I guess go for that. Again, from experience, that's something I never saw us stop. We never stopped tuning it. So, but maybe you'll have better luck than we did. If you can't build your own 24/7 SOC, engage one and set up a third party to provide SOC services, at least for the after hours and weekends. I mean, even if all they do initially is note that there was an event, they can notify your day team or your in-house team to deal with it and respond if needed. If necessary, if you can't quite go that far, maybe implement a MDR or managed detection and response service. Some of your EDR solutions provide that now as well, if it's something you want to go with. So VPNs, this is more VPN specific. When you implement your VPN, implement dynamic access control. It's not enough to know that a machine was okay to connect to a network the moment it connected. You want to keep on monitoring it. If it suddenly goes wonky, if its health drops or a security trust level drops below a certain level, you need to have a response built in, either a notification, an automated response that says, all right, we're going to quarantine, or we're going to put them in a network where they can get themselves clean. But you want to have a solution in place that does that. XDR, that's really your EDR providers saying, hey, we can give you a whole lot more and charge you for it. But it's it will bring everything sort of under one umbrella. Your virtual desktop environment, if you can move as many of your employees to that does provide you more space to quarantine than you would be if you had a physical machine. It also gives you a space with a lot of the option, or a lot of the solutions, where you can just sort of, you can lock it down, they can't get out, but it keeps everything that needs to be in memory there in memory, so that you don't lose the everything that happened. Because too often, when a system is compromised, the first thing that people do is they turn it off. It's like, well, no, don't do that, because then we just lost everything that's in memory, and we can't. The IR folks aren't going to have as much to work with. So. And not move. And just a few more things. I'm almost done. Hello? Oh, now I'm back here. This is awesome. Okay, this is just something I found on the internet. It's pretty useful. It's instructions to your end users. Think before you click. That's pretty standard stuff. Don't click on something on the internet you shouldn't. If you get that email that promising you $1,000 if you respond, don't do that. But not joking aside, just so that your end users know the usual hygiene stuff. I mean, it applies even more now. Connect only when you're out and about. Connect only to trusted networks. Don't connect to the free Wi-Fi. Don't connect to somebody's unknown hotspot. They shouldn't have to ask for multi-factor authentication now, because we've already provided it, so we'll just jump over that. Separate and segregate their home networks. This might just be a road bump to an attacker, but it's another annoyance that might help slow down somebody who's trying to break into your network, and might make somebody else look like a better target. The only thing I see about this is you can't require this, or your network teams will come at you hard, because they are not going to want to be in a position where they're saying, oh, by the way, you have to support everybody's home network. That's not going to fly. But it's not that hard. You just put it out there to the end users. Like, you can set it up so that your work stuff is on a different network than your TV, than your kid's game system. And you really want to be separate from your son's game system, because I have a son, and I just know you want him separate, and you also want to be able to point to where he is when the FBI comes. And update your home router software. That's, again, it's basic stuff, blocking and tackling, but this is important, because that's now sort of the entryway, the egress into your perimeter. So have fun thinking about that. I'm not really going to stay here too long on this. I only brought it up because, and I can't remember when this was brought up as an option, but somebody in management was saying, well, why do we give people laptops? Why can't we just have them use their own? So I just recommend that don't. I wouldn't go that route. And if they really want to do that, then everybody's got to have a VDI, or everybody's got to have a published application, because that's and as I say at the bottom, like your security controls, you're not going to be able to put them on somebody's home system, because that's not going to apply. And the final analysis, it's about the destination. It's not about the destination. It's about the journey. And on the bright side, if it was easy, most of us wouldn't have jobs. So it's always fun, and there's always another challenge to look forward to. And with that, thank you very much.